Welcome to another GM Tips. GM Rick here. So this week we're going to talk, and we've been talking along different themes. Again, my Texas dad. I like to wash it and rewear it. I don't get to wear it that often. So we're going to talk about Native American type of theme, or a Native, I don't know. I mean, again, everybody likes to see their cultures represented in RPG. So yeah, we're going to go Native American and South American, Native American type of themes. And you can incorporate these in campaigns. And again, what you'll find in many campaigns, folks, there are people who do their own original worlds that have nothing to do with the Earth and don't even have a culture similar to the Earth. However, most campaigns, whether it be Paizo's Inner Sea campaign or whether it's, Greyhawk or any of the others, they all have a flair. Midgard, they all base off of human cultures. And it's funny that it is that way, but we do. I mean, we base a lot off of our own understanding and our own concepts of things. So don't feel bad about doing that. I mean, sometimes you can be totally off the wall. Most of your stuff's going to have some sort of a flair that's based off of Earth. And so don't feel bad in anything you do in it, but have fun with it. So, again, I'm going to go to this because this does a great job of taking Native Americans into account as we're going through this. So, mind you, I'm going to go to some of Paizo's stuff, so I'm giving huge props to the different creators in there. So let me do that real quick. The authors on this are John Compton, Adam Daigle, Crystal Frazier, Amanda Heyman-Kuntz, Rob McCrary, Mark Moreland, James Sutter, and Owen K.C. Stevens. All wonderful authors, by the way, and great project managers over to the different things that they work on. So, the Native Americans and the flavors, and what should you really consider when you decide to design a campaign around this? Now, if you're from that culture, I'm telling you nothing you already don't know. If you aren't and you want to bring it in and have that kind of flair, I'm going to give you some things that are very important because, fortunately, in my life, I've had a few people who are Native American, and I love the culture. I really do. Beautiful people who really understand a lot of things when it comes to reverence of life and nature and the earth itself. And it goes to that. The number one thing when you look at a Native American campaign is there's a deep reverence for Mother Nature. And it's really true. A lot of your druids, your shamans, your earth-based type of magic would come out of a Native American campaign. They believe in the elements. They believe in all the different things. It's very different, though, than the African and the Asian view of things. And there is a lot of difference. The Native American were people of freedom, but they still believed in the basic tribal laws as well. They loved the freedom of movement and not being tied to one area. They were very much about roaming and moving their tribe to where they could follow the herds of buffalo or other types of nature, moving away from the really harsh seasons. They believed in using everything. So when they took the life of an animal to partake of sustenance, they would very much revere that animal. And they believed in treating it with deep reverence and in using every part of it so that way nothing was wasted and it wasn't a wasted life given. And they have that reverence and that deep love of life and respect of it. And it's very different than many other cultures. Many other cultures, now with the exception of maybe the Asian cultures, there was not necessarily all that reverence. Africans, yes, had that reverence initially, I believe, in their tribes, but moved away from it quickly. The Native Americans never have. They've kept their love of Mother Nature and their respect for their different gods and goddesses, which were more spirits. They looked at them as spirits that guided them through life. So they were a spiritualistic type of people. Their dances meant something. It was a celebration. So like the mourning dance. Some people think it's like mourning sadness. No. It was welcoming in, the Lakota welcomed in the morning. So they would do a dance ritual in the morning to welcome that morning. Now, again, you don't have to have the Native Americans cultures in your world be totally barbaric in what many cultures would see them. They can be very advanced. The one thing that Pathfinder did was they advanced and wrote about an advanced Native American culture. And yet it was in the same era as their medieval type of setting, RPG setting. So they were not a backwards people by any means. They were very much a colonial style people. And I believe had given time, Native Americans would have been that. I think they would have grown very much into a colonial people where they had advances in water, in wells, in other things, because in time they would have discovered that by studying nature. And so when you design your campaign, don't make it necessarily a backwards yurt and riding around unless you want to do that. You don't have to. Tribes can be about that, but don't feel they have to be, because they don't. They can be very much a progressing people. But at the heart of it, they still revere nature. At the heart of it, they still revere the spirits. They still very much are thankful for each bounty and each thing they take from the earth. And they remember to give back to the earth as well in reverence. And so they're a spiritualistic people. And please, please don't take that out of your culture when you do your campaign. If I have one request out of GM tips, include that, because that's what makes them what they are. Hi, Bug. How are you, Mini GM? I see you got one of the gups.
What is on it?
That's Peso. So, oh, he's riding around. All right, so sorry guys, it's probably the end of that. But don't take that out of there, because that's what makes them who they are. Sorry, I'm doing a lot of ums. Soft ums. They are a very, very deep, rich, rich culture, and each one is markedly different. The Puebla are different from the Azteca, are different from the Maya, are different from the Inca, are different from the Lakota or the Sioux, are very different from the Crow, are very different from the Algonquin. You don't have to necessarily use those names. Pick whatever ones, but with your tribes, have them markedly different. There's similarities in them, but depending on the area and what nature surrounds them depends on who they are. So some may do some logging to build their buildings, but they will replant the seeds. They will not leave it, just cut it down and never replant. They don't believe in that. They may live up in the trees and use the trees as part of their deal. They may use water type of boats to move and have their place of existence. They may have permanent dwellings. They may have semi-permanent dwellings. All these things are great because there are different aspects of them. Some were much more set on where their tribe was than others, depending on the land, depending on how giving it was. And they never wanted to take too much or destroy the land. They would sow and plant. They were very agricultural in background, so keep that in mind. And they were very wise and very smart. They understood things in ways, in deep ways that often people didn't. So your occult classes are perfect for your Native Americans, as well as your shamans. And your shamans don't have to be backwards. You can use some very forward shaman type of classes. Now, if you're doing a more modern one, so say like we talked about the other day, the Native Americans can be much more developed and have their own nation that is very advanced. But at the same time, they try not to pollute. So it would be a very green culture where they might use the advancements, but they're respectful in it. They don't pollute. Yes, their prices might be a little higher and their standard of living a little higher. But they're not going to build necessarily skyscrapers. Why? Because it would pollute their skyline. They would keep it to a much more, maybe a two-story building type of aspect, because they want to see the sky, the sun rises. Maybe they get together in the morning and have a worship together. that is a welcoming of each day. You can really make it unique in these ways because they did, and they do this day. And if you meet many Native Americans today, they have that reverence overall of nature and of their standing and place in life because they realize that without it, they would not have what they have. And so there was an appreciation and a gratitude, though there was also a bitterness because of the colonization of their country by us, by the Europeans. Now, you don't necessarily have to have that in your campaign. You can be devoid that and go the direction it would have gone had that not happened. So keep that in mind. You can do a lot of justice and reverence to making the campaign extra special. They were not about patriarchies necessarily. The chief in every tribe didn't have to be a male. It could be a patriarchal society. In some of the South American ones, there were some things where it was matriarchal versus patriarchal. Now, mind you, the more southern ones were a little more violent because of the volcanoes, the things they lived in, the harshness of the jungle. So their warriors had much more of a fierceness to them and a warrior-esque type of belief. They believed that once they integrated a people that they would sacrifice several out of reverence for what was done, but also to show their enemies that they were truly defeated. So there was much more of a slaving type of mentality in the southern tribes than in the northern. Though it did happen, and tribes did conquer tribes. So keep that in mind. I know many of you are against and may have a negativity towards slaving, but cultures have done it for thousands of years. It doesn't make it right. It's just part of what they were and how they believed. And again, they didn't necessarily make a tribe a slave forever. It was the first generation because they had to integrate that tribe into their own. And they had to make sure that the tribe didn't turn around and reconquer back the other direction. So they did this for a reason. And again, I don't justify it. It's just part of the culture. And so, if you want to have an anti-slavery group, that's fine. But they're not necessarily going to be the majority in this type of culture. It was okay. And the culture saw it as okay. They were very wise in the understanding of the earth and its functionality as a whole. So as you get into this age, you can have libraries, great libraries, where they have studied nature itself and the very existence and how things work and the inner working of things. They had a lot on talking to their ancestors and their spirits. The days of the dead, honoring the spirits, making sure they were not forgotten by the southern tribes in the U.S. The northern would do these things in calling on elder spirits to get wisdom from those chiefs or former leaders or shamans in order to try and have a better understanding of what they were facing. So you can have a lot of that, and it will replace your clerics would be much more about spirits and spiritualism than maybe a single god. And they didn't always necessarily patron to one god, unless it was like Camazotz and some of the more violent ones. Those they were very much more violent and reverent in working with. So keep that in mind when you do this. They might build cliff dwellings. Don't be surprised of seeing whole cities on cliffs, cut out of cliffs, because they believed in trying to use those tunnels and keep things with the very balance of nature. And sometimes, like the Anasazi, they would hide themselves to protect themselves from their enemies because they blended in, and it was harder to find their actual civilization. So you can have that with tribes as well, mountain tribes, other tribes, and countries and nations where it's much more geared that way. Now, I hope it gives you a little bit of flavor there. Look up a lot of the Native American weapons, like the tomahawks and some other things. Yes, it'll fit into the molds of other weapons, but it gives it a uniqueness. They were very much about the colors. So if you look at like this one, I love this because it represented their tribes when they did this. Let's go to Sagada. Where's Sagada? There's Sagada. It's after Radripal. There it is. So, very much about the colors of their tribes and the colors of vibrance. So keep in mind that when you do this, that there are colorful people. Very much like the gypsy people almost in other cultures. So even in modern day stuff, you can do the armors and other things and leather jackets to be those type of things with the sequins and the beads. And even for a guy, it's not something that was considered feminine necessarily. It was about their very who they are and showing. It was almost like the tribes were almost like peacocks at times, flashing their feathers out and showing you who they were so that you understood and respected who they were. So keep that in mind. When two tribes meet, there's a lot of this. Not necessarily is going to be a battle going on. There is just a who is dominant here, a setting of the dominance. Whether it be between the men or the women, there was a dominance order. And it played out that way on who was more in a position of advantage. Not very different than other cultures, but to them it was an art. It was an art form in going forward and going up there and listing one's living and life and who they were so that you understood who you were negotiating with and you had respect for them. Keep that in mind. Did they do metalworking and stuff? Of course they did. In the beginning, it started out with just the simple earth and shaping of earth, but they would be craftspeople as well. But at the same time, their crafts, they wouldn't be trying to do a lot of poisoning of the land. They would find ways to craft in such a way that they didn't dump into a river or some other form of life. They believed in cleanliness. So they would be, like I said, going back to the green, their smiths would find ways to try to keep the poisons out. So that way they didn't harm the very land with which they had the sustenance from. And they tried to get back to it as much as possible in that regard. So I hope this gives you a little flair there. Now, again, there was very much a difference in beliefs as you get more southern because there was much more life. Life continued. It didn't get cold at night. It didn't have the other flares. So things came alive at night. So the darkness to the southern tribes was both powerful and revered. So there was almost a darker tinge to the Azteca, the Maya, the Inca. They had very much more of a survival of the fittest, jungle-esque type of view of life. And that's because they were in a jungle. Let's face it. You're facing a jungle. You have to work with that and help them to understand that. So again, I hope this gives you a little bit of flair into this. Keep it, again, it would be more of a tribal as you have a whole nation or whole area wrapped around native. They would have tribal councils of each country or each state where they would work together, but it was very tribal, and you would consult the overall vision of all of them. So I hate to say it's like a first UN, but it kind of is like a UN in that sense, where they're going to come together and get a consensus, and that consensus leads to where they will go and how they will act. So keep that in mind. All right, I hope this helps you in the going through this. I know I could have much more. This one's a little bit lighter because I've hit you a little heavier on the other two. So I don't want to just take too much, but it gives you just do some study of any of these cultures as you do it. Do them the proper reverence. That's the only thing I ask as a GM, because it'll make the game come alive that much more. And then people will think, okay, you're not just trying to convert this around the core system, but you really bring it to life. All right, have a great morning, have a great week, and a great weekend of gaming. This is GM Rick, and I'm out.